today, I looked at the ones that we've already covered, and I realized, oh, these are the ones that I really connect to. These are sort of my favorites. And so there's one other favorite I have, but it's going to be in December. But the other ones, oh yeah, they're part of me, I know, but it was somewhat different, harder to connect to them. Yet, our power that we're going to be talking about today, the power of order, is exactly what I needed to be studying once again and experiencing. Because I will tell you, right now, my life is being anything but orderly and harmonious. And so to recognize the power of order has been really valuable to me. And I hope you had a takeaway or two from this morning too. Our power of order rests here, sort of right behind our belly button. And it is our power to order, to balance, to synchronize, and to prioritize so that our life unfolds in a harmonious way. It is an order whether in the moment we're feeling it or not, observing it or not. It is always at work. Always at work in our personal lives, always at work in our world. And I was thinking about that as I drove up from Sacramento this morning, because, you know, the fields are rich with life right now. The orchards, I could actually see peaches hanging on the trees. And I was thinking, you know, everything always happens in its time. And I can be somewhat eager sometimes to open that blossom before it's ready to unfold by itself. Do you remember as a kid how you used to see a bud and open it to see what might happen? Yeah, well, sometimes I feel that way still. I would like my life to unfold a little more quickly than it is. But because, thank goodness, of my ministerial training, I have learned that there is a right time. I tended to think of our power of order and order itself in my life to be somewhat confining, because I'm a pretty spontaneous person. And when I think of order, I think more of rigidity. I think more of having to have things in a particular way. But that is not what our power of order is. Our power of order is working toward a balance, working toward being open to synchronicity, open to understanding that for our lives to unfold in a meaningful and in what I would call a beautiful way, we have to know what to put first. So our power of order is a way to look at our lives, to begin to evaluate really, truly, where do my priorities lie? And prioritizing and living by that. I know that there are people in my life who says, well, I have so many things that are important to me. I have so many things that I love to do, but it's really hard to prioritize them. So I just do one thing sometimes and one thing another time. And I understand that because a lot of us do that. I do that sometimes. But have you recognized when that's the way you choose to order your life, that really it feels somewhat chaotic? I think of my husband, Jim, and I don't think he'd mind if I told this story, but Jim is a very organized person. But Jim makes his lists. And then by the end of the day, he may have some of the ending things on his list finished, but he doesn't have the top priority done. And so sometimes what we do is we list our priorities for ourselves. We think of the values in our life. And then we don't really live by that. So we have this talk, but we don't really walk our talk. And have you found with yourself that when you're not walking your talk, there's this sort of a feeling of disconnect? That you're saying one thing and you're doing another, and maybe not even consciously, but you know that there's something working around in you that doesn't feel quite in alignment? That happens. And that happens when we are not truly living our priorities and our values. Our order is the power of ideas of harmonious progress. And I've used this book before. It's not a favorite book of mine at all. It's called Adventures in Resilience, and it's by a Unity minister named Sharon Connors. And although I don't really have this as one of my favorite books, in each of the powers, she has something that she says that really strikes me. And for the power of order and harmonious unfoldment, this is what she says. I have heard it said that divine order is the first law of heaven. It is the inherent capacity to perceive and cooperate with the laws of growth. It is essential for right outcomes. It is the mantle of harmonious progress. Isn't that a beautiful phrase? The mantle of harmonious progress. So if we want to wear this mantle of harmonious progress, if we want to live with a feeling of balance in our lives and a feeling like we're walking our talk, we have a number of things that we need to do. First of all, it is really valuable for each of us to take some time and first of all, list for ourselves or think for ourselves to somehow or another clarify ourselves what we say that our values are. What is my highest value? Now, I know that I've always said from the time that I had children that my highest value was my family. And I think that I lived that. But what I had to recognize, and I didn't realize for some time, that if I put my value on my family, there are other things that I had to say no to. At the time, I was a family counselor and I worked with a pediatric office. And I had babies and I had little children. And you know, they get sick sometimes, or sometimes it's just an off day. And I had to realize that sometimes there were times that I needed to cancel clients. And I felt really bad about that because my clients were of a high value to me also. And yet, my family was a higher value. And so there can be, at least in me, this push-pull kind of feeling. Like, well, if family's my highest value and my clients are my highest value, where do I go in this particular moment? And it can be a challenge for us. We truly have to know and understand ourselves and then not judge ourselves when we look at our values. And if we truly do an exercise with this, consciously and with focused attention, we may recognize that where we choose to put our time is not what we say our highest value is. One time, many, many years ago, a very wise person said to me, Carolyn, do not listen to people's words, watch their behavior. And I will tell you, that has been extremely meaningful to me because, I mean, as a speaker, as a writer, just in interpersonal relationships, words are really important to me. And I value my word and I use it with as much integrity as I can. But I also know that where I have really learned that people walk their talk is by watching their walk. And there are times that people have used powerful words, but if they are not living those words, they're pretty meaningless, aren't they? So what we want to do is we want to watch carefully and see, are we putting our time where we say our values are? And if we find out that we're not, we don't judge ourselves, we don't beat ourselves up. We say, well, isn't this interesting? Thank you, Spirit, for showing me that what I'm saying and what I'm doing are not in alignment. I have the opportunity to choose again. I can choose to make my words match my behavior, or I can choose to match my behavior to my words. And I will tell you, it provides a great sense of relief. Order brings freedom to our lives, regardless of what we may think. Because when that tension of saying one thing and acting differently is no longer there, we sort of breathe a sigh of relief. We say, oh, this is what it feels like. This is what it feels like. After we've chosen our behaviors, we pay attention to how many times a day we say yes and we say no. And I know I say yes and no, oftentimes with not as much consciousness as I should. And I find myself having said yes to things that I probably should have said no to. You know, after my husband fell, I wrote to Carolyn and I told her this. Actually, Carolyn had to write to me to ask me the name of my talk. And I wrote back to her and I told her, and she said, wouldn't you like to maybe not come on Sunday? And I mean, with no hesitation at all, I said, no, I want to be here. I love you. I love this church and this congregation. And my support and sustenance comes from all of you and being in this sacred space. And so I knew that my husband, I told him, don't shower while I'm gone, don't try to walk, sit in front of your computer and enjoy the next couple or 3 hours. Because I knew that as much as I love him and as much as I feel concerned right now, my highest priority was to be here. And so in this respect, I put Sunday morning at church higher than family. And I had to really work with myself a little bit. Oh, if he fell down. Oh, if he broke a vertebrae. Oh, what if he falls while I'm gone? Well, I just put all that aside and said, Spirit's going to handle this. If he falls, my daughter is nearby. She can get there. And so here I am, you guys, talking about order in my life. And Lord, I am exactly the place that I need to be in this moment. As good Unity Truth students, we know and we have learned and we have believed that our spiritual life and that people are first above material possessions. Now, there's nothing wrong with material possessions. All of us want to live a comfortable life. We want everybody to have not only a comfortable life, but some of those extras that make life feel good and special. Like maybe I don't need a new skirt, but maybe if I want a new skirt and I see the perfect one, there's nothing wrong with getting it. It's just that if I said to somebody, I'll be with you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's 10 minutes of 3 when I see that skirt. Instead of going and trying it on, I'll keep my commitment to the person instead. But I think sometimes we have to know that God never wanted us to be poor. God never wanted us to deprive ourselves. Many years ago, I lived in Southern California, and I lived in a town that didn't have a unity church. And so I got really involved in religious science, very involved. And we had a terrific minister of our church, and she dressed beautifully, and she drove a beautiful car, and she had a nice home. And there were people that judged Peggy for that. And Peggy used to say, "We are not serving anybody by acting or by looking poor. We have to show that God has given us abundance, and however we choose to use that abundance, as long as it's not taking away from somebody else, we are models for that abundance of God." I've always remembered that because I think sometimes people who are on the spiritual path think that it's more holy to be poor. But we were never told to be poor. That is not the order of life. Our job is to order abundance and prosperity into our lives and to offer gratitude for all of that we have. Jesus, our way shower, used the power of order in his life in a very positive way. He modeled for us that God, his Father, the kingdom of God, was the highest priority in his life. And he guided us and taught us ways to make that true for ourselves too. Jesus was a rebel. He was a rabble-rouser. He was a zealot. He was a person that drove the Sadducees and the Pharisees crazy because he was not living the religious life. He was not poor. I don't know what your picture of Jesus is, but from the time I was a little girl, I pictured him in a white robe with long blonde hair and blue eyes, but walking through the desert very poor. Jesus wasn't poor. He had women followers who provided richly for him. He had people that were supporting his ministry monetarily. And if you remember, at his crucifixion, the guards threw lots for his garments. So we know that Jesus modeled a life of sustained, I guess I'll say, abundance, because he never walked poorly through the world. He walked humbly through the world. But when you think about it, poverty and humbleness are not synonymous, are they? No, being humble means accepting with gratitude all the gifts that we have been given. So back to Jesus. He modeled for us that spirituality was his highest priority, and that it can be ours if we follow his way. The Sadducees and the Pharisees and others thought that he had come to break the law, but he didn't. He came to show us that there was a higher law in the teachings of the time, and that higher law was love. And that when we live with love, regardless of what we see or feel the kingdom of heaven being, we are exhibiting our spirituality. And we can love in many ways, and we can love people. And I don't know, I use the word a lot. Oh, I loved driving through the fields this morning on my way here. Oh, I loved hearing Paula. Oh, I loved Rumi. I mean, you know, I was just reading recently, and I can't remember what society it is, but they have something like 2,000 words for love, because it's all divided. And in America, you know, we use love for a lot of stuff. Anyway, when we are living from love and with love, we are allowing that flower that is us to unfold in an orderly fashion. And then when we offer gratitude for each step that we see in our unfoldment, we are paving the way for the next one. And you probably recognize yourself, I certainly do in myself, that no matter how much we've studied, how much we know, how much we practice the spiritual life, that the minute we get to one place, there's another path ahead of us, isn't there? It is never done until we lie on our deathbed, hopefully in a peaceful way. We will be growing and we will be unfolding in an orderly fashion, whether we recognize it or not. And we can be grateful. Just like Jesus expressed the power of order in his unique way, each of us do too. None of our lives look the same. And when we're following our inner guidance from God to be that person that we were designed to be, we don't unfold like anybody else. There are similarities. I mean, we look around the room and all of us are similar in so many ways, and yet we are each unique. And so when we exhibit in our lives, when we accept the power of order, not as we might think of that sort of obsessive compulsive, everything has to be in the right place at the right time, not that kind of order. The order where we are conscious of, practice, and give gratitude for our own orderly and harmonious unfoldment. We are living that power that rests right here. And we claim that. And we say, thank you that I know now that I can live in harmony and balance when I carefully choose my priorities and walk my talk. So I, this week, am certainly going to be more conscious of where I say yes and where I say no. And am I choosing my priorities and putting my time and my energy there? Knowing that if I'm not, I can always choose again. So I invite you to do that with me, knowing that together we're working on this power together. And I know that you'll have a beautiful, beautiful week, unfolding into the flowers that you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful.